Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into a grand Victorian mansion. Lace curtains hang in the windows, brass knockers gleam on the doors, and the staircases creak softly under years of footsteps. You're not a guest here, not tonight. You're the newest member of the staff, still fixing your cap and smoothing your apron, stomach tight, hands clammy. The footman flashed you a crooked grin and muttered something about just you wait until you meet her. You haven't laid eyes on the lady of the house yet, or the gentleman, but you've already caught the heavy jingle of keys echoing through the back hallway. You don't even know her name yet, but you know she's awake, and if you're wise, you're already making your bed tighter than military standards. You step through the servants' entrance as the clock strikes 6. It's not a warm reception. The corridor is still dim, carrying faint traces of ash and shoe polish. The silence here isn't empty, it's structured. You can practically sense someone observing from behind one of those firmly closed doors. A pair of black leather boots materializes at the corridor's end. They don't stomp, they don't shuffle, they glide. The housekeeper, dressed head to toe in black bombazine, emerges like a natural force. Her hair is pulled so tight it could cut through butter. Her eyes scan your shoes, your collar, the way you're clasping your hands. She doesn't nod, doesn't frown, just observes. You won't discover if she approves of you until 3 Thursdays pass, and even then she might just assign you extra silver to polish as acknowledgement. You attempt to smile. She doesn't reciprocate. She gestures silently toward the staircase descending downward. Your kitchen staff. The butler murmurs behind you, but she's already vanished around the corner. You realize he waited to speak until she had gone. You descend the steps, passing rooms with names you don't grasp yet. Scullery, still room, boot room. You spot another girl, perhaps 16, with red raw knuckles, scrubbing a pan like it offended her. She doesn't glance up. You're invisible here, unless the housekeeper decides otherwise. Because that's the rule you're about to learn. Nothing happens in this house without her approval. Breakfast isn't prepared, coal isn't kindled, and laundry doesn't dry unless she has it in her daily record. You could knock over a vase and the lady upstairs might not even register it, but if you leave a fingerprint on the doorknob to the morning room, she will. You'll hear whispers later that she once managed 5 households, that she knows how many buttons are absent from every uniform, that she maintains a list of which maids blush excessively when the gardener comes around, that she caught a footman sneaking leftover lamb in 1872 and he never worked again. Oh, and that she never forgets. She inspects the cleaning rags like they're surgical tools. She tracks the use of soap down to the ½ ounce, and her black notebook travels with her always. Some say it contains the secrets of the house. Others say it's just a method to write your name in when you've disappointed her for the 4th time. No one's ever seen her flip past page 32. Alright, before you settle in too much, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe, but only if your heart says yes. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Dim the lights, get that fan going for some background atmosphere, and let's ease into tonight's little adventure. She taps the clock on the kitchen wall. 7 sharp, she looks at you. That's the only signal you receive before she disappears into the larder. Welcome to the first morning of the rest of your life, and tomorrow you better be 5 minutes early. By your 2nd hour in the house, you've already learned what not to do. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't track ash across the floorboards, and above all, don't try to assist unless the housekeeper herself instructs you to. She doesn't shout. She doesn't need to. When she moves, everyone else seems to hold their breath, like the air itself adjusts to accommodate her passage. You see the kitchen maid stiffen when she hears that particular heel click on the stone. You notice the under-butler adjusting his cravat again, even though no one important is expected that morning. It's as though the Queen herself could walk through, but it's her presence that straightens backs and silences coughs. In theory, the lady of the house is the one in charge, but she spends most of her time arranging flowers and replying to correspondence. The master is rarely seen, business in the city, hunting weekends, social clubs. They're the decorative face of the household. The housekeeper, she's the backbone. When something breaks, it's her who arranges the repair. When someone's late, it's her knock at the door that follows. She's both judge and jury in the world below stairs, and not even the butler dares to play defense attorney unless it's worth risking a month's worth of cold glances. She has her own staircase, separate from yours, her own room with a small fireplace and thick curtains. Rumour has it she keeps a tin of biscuits locked in her drawer, but no one's ever seen her eat. She drinks her tea strong and black, never with milk. The strangest thing. There's no rage in her, no theatrical cruelty, just structure. If you drop a plate, she doesn't scold, she simply records it. Then somehow you find yourself scrubbing chamber pots the next 3 nights instead of doing afternoon teacups. You'll never be told it was punishment, it just happens. Like weather, you're sent to collect linens from the airing cupboard. On your way, you pass the butler, who nods politely, then glances down the hallway. You follow his gaze. She's standing there, not moving, just watching. You realise something. He waited until she wasn't looking to smile at you. That evening, as the staff eats their stew in the servants' hall, someone mentions the new parlourmaid already gone. Too slow, with a coal scuttle, didn't fold napkins properly. Or maybe she whispered too loudly about the younger son's boots. No one knows for sure, but they all agree on one thing. It was her decision. Later, you pass by her room again. The door is slightly open. Inside, you catch a glimpse of something strange. A sewing kit, perfectly arranged. A portrait on the wall, not of family, but of the first house she ever managed. The frame is dusty, but the glass gleams. And next to it, a list. Names, dates, houses, maybe old stuff, maybe not. You'll sleep in the attic tonight. Your mattress is thin. Your pillow smells of starch. But more than anything, what keeps you awake is the knowledge that tomorrow the same clock will chime. She'll appear again at the end of the hall. And once again, without a word, the whole house will pivot to face her gravity. You wonder if she ever sleeps. The second day arrives. It's the keys that capture your attention, not her face. Not the stiff black bombazine or the faint scent of lavender water and coal dust, but the enormous gleaming ring of keys that swings from her belt with every step. Not all the staff have noticed it yet. They're too busy with their own tasks, scrubbing, polishing, folding, and sighing. But you watch, and you realise those keys aren't just tools, they're symbols. Each one opens a door, but together they form a map of control. There's the long bronze one, curved teeth, slightly dulled. That's for the linen closet. You see her use it twice today. Wants to inspect a folded sheet, wants to relock the door. The housekeeper doesn't just hand out fresh linens. She inspects the corner stitching if it's worn. She marks it in a notebook with a neat notation. What it means, you have no idea. But by the next day, the sheet is gone. The big iron one with the ornate bow, that's the silver cupboard. She opens it in the presence of the butler, and only then. He counts. She double counts. It's not mistrust, it's policy. 2 minds, 1 count, but her hand is the one that locks it again, and the ring goes back on her belt. Even the cook doesn't get access to the preserves without her. There's a tiny brass key, delicate as a child's spoon, that she uses to open the spice drawer. You watch as she measures out 2 ounces of mace and a pinch of cinnamon. Then she relocks it. The cook doesn't argue. She knows better. Nutmeg's expensive. Nutmeg disappears when left unlocked. Later, you ask the tweenie, a younger maid whose only job seems to be running up and down stairs until she faints, why the housekeeper guards the keys herself. Because she doesn't just run the house, the tweenie whispers. She is the house. You think it's dramatic until you see her open the wine cellar. There's a small, dusty stair hidden behind a cabinet in the dining room hallway. She opens it with a key so old it looks medieval. She disappears down into the darkness, and the butler follows with a candle. No one else goes. That bottle of claret served at dinner tonight made its way through her fingers. But even more curious, there are keys she never uses. One has no matching lock in sight. It's twisted, old, and looks scorched. The tweenie says it used to open the old schoolroom before the young master was sent away, and the governess ran off to Brighton. Another one is rumoured to fit a chest under the mistress's bed, but no one knows what's inside. When she walks, the keys rattle softly. It's a sound that begins to haunt you like the slow ticking of the grandfather clock in the entryway, because every door that opens is a privilege, and every one she leaves locked is a message. That night you dream of keys. They dangle over your head like stars, turning slowly, their teeth clicking against one another like whispers. You wake up before dawn, heart racing, unsure if it was the chime of the downstairs clock or just the sound of her passing below your floorboards. You see, the housekeeper doesn't just own the keys, she orchestrates the rhythm of the entire house with them. When she unlocks the servants' pantry in the morning, it's a signal the day has begun. When she locks it again at 9 in the evening, no one dares sneak a biscuit afterward. The same applies to the laundry cupboard, the coal scuttles, even the drawer where the good napkins are kept for Sunday tea. The keys aren't just about objects, they're about time, hierarchy, control. You've noticed that she'll sometimes unlock a door and then, without explanation, lock it again moments later. You ask no questions. That's the first thing everyone learns. She doesn't need to say a word. She'll just jingle the keys slightly, and suddenly the tweenie stops humming, the footman sets down his newspaper, and the kitchen maid drops her voice mid-gossip. It's not fear exactly, it's reverence, or perhaps a kind of quiet survival instinct. One afternoon, you're assigned to help carry clean towels up to the guest corridor. That's when you notice a door you've never seen opened. Dark green with a brass handle right near the master's study. No one speaks of it. You ask the under-housemaid what's inside and she just says she's the only one who ever goes in. Of course, she appears as you ask, and for the first time her gaze lands on you. Before you notice her approach, she steps between you and the green door. "No one but me," she says simply. Not cruel, not menacing, just final. You nod. She turns and her keys swing once more. That same haunting clink, a sound like rules wrapped in metal. It's around then you realise something else. Even the butler doesn't have keys. Oh, he carries a little ring. 3 or 4 simple brass ones. He can access the wine glasses, the decanters, and the door to the smoking room. But he must ask her if he wants the cellar unlocked, and the butler asking anyone for anything. That's a rare sight. Later that week, the mistress of the house comes downstairs unexpectedly. She wants a certain tablecloth, Irish linen, hand-stitched, kept in the blue box. And it's the housekeeper who opens the cabinet, not the lady herself. That's when it finally dawns on you. The lady of the house owns the silver, the china, the linens. But she doesn't know where they are or how many or when they were last used. The housekeeper does. That keyring is her scepter. Every click is a decree. And when you overhear the lady whisper to a guest that the staff have been so reliable this year, you watch the housekeeper in the corner, sipping her tea, expression unreadable. She knows. She knows who really keeps the house running. She knows exactly how many sugar cubes were used this week, and if someone ever did try to steal a spoon, she'd know before they did it. And maybe, just maybe, that's why no one ever dares. You don't see her room until your 3rd week in the house. Not because it's hidden, no, it's just there, tucked behind the main service hallway, the one with the tiled floor and the faint scent of boiled starch. But no one ever dares walk too close. You've passed it every day. A dark walnut door with a polished brass handle and a nameplate so immaculate you're sure she polishes it herself. Housekeeper is all it says. No name, as if she is the role and the role is her. This morning, though, she calls for you. You freeze. Every other maid in the scullery looks up, eyes wide. The tweenie clutches her bucket. The kitchen maid mouths good luck. You knock. Her voice is calm. Enter. Inside, it's nothing like you expected. No gloom, no harshness. The room is small but warm. There's a fire quietly burning in a cast iron grate. A round table holds her accounts, ink pots, and 2 clocks, one set precisely 2 minutes ahead. Beside the fireplace, a bookshelf, neat rows of manuals, ledgers, and one worn volume of Tennyson. But what arrests you most is the sense of quiet authority. Everything has its place. Nothing is wasted. Even her slippers are set at the exact same angle, beneath the chair. The air smells faintly of lavender and something sharper, carbolic soap perhaps. She doesn't offer you a seat, of course not, but she gestures toward the linen logbook. Have a look. I want you to understand how the inventory runs. You step forward, heart hammering, and there it is, line after line of entries in her unmistakable slanted hand. Tablecloths, pillowcases, antimacassars, each item numbered, initialed, and marked with the date last used. Next to some are quiet little notes, frayed, rehemmed, transferred to attic linen. She watches you absorb the information, saying nothing. You realise this is the closest thing to praise you're going to get. She's testing you, inviting you in just a sliver. Above the desk hangs a framed sampler, the kind little girls once embroidered in finishing school. Only this one reads, "Order is peace." It's stitched in navy thread. The frame is plain oak. Somehow that suits her better than any portrait ever could. A knock interrupts. It's the butler. He stands in the doorway, stiff-backed but deferential. The mistress requests the green brocade runner. Without a word, she unlocks the drawer behind her, retrieves it, folded perfectly, and hands it over. The butler nods once. No pleasantries, just function, and vanishes again. She doesn't look at you as she closes the drawer, relocks it, and returns to her seat. "The upstairs may run on opinion," she says, "but we run on fact." You glance at the bookshelves again. Some of the spines are cracked, as though read and reread over decades. There's a ledger, marked 1847, another labelled staff rotations, a third with no label at all. She notices your eyes. That one stays shut. You nod. No explanation needed. Later that evening, as the house winds down and the lamps are lit one by one, you find yourself retracing your steps through the hallway where her room quietly resides. This time you pause. You hadn't noticed it before, but the positioning of her room is deliberate. From that single doorway she commands a perfect view of both staircases, the service hallway and the kitchen entrance. No staff member can sneak past without her knowing. It's not surveillance, it's design. She doesn't need to chase, she just knows. You peek again at the door, closed now, silent. But you know she's in there, likely reviewing the household ledger by candlelight or preparing the order sheet for Friday's market delivery. She never seems to rest, only resets. The next morning, she's the first one up again. Because the fireplace is already lit when you come down and the tea kettle is warm. She must have been awake at least an hour before you. You've yet to catch her in any state of disorder. Not a hair out of place, not a button unfastened. And then there's the bellboard. It's mounted just outside her room, covered with tiny brass indicators labelled with each room in the house. When a member of the family rings from upstairs, say for hot water or a writing tray, a bell sounds and the label swings. She hears the bell before it finishes its first chime. Once you saw the tweenie race to respond to a ring from the morning room, only to find the housekeeper already halfway there, towel in hand, calm as anything. "One must always be listening," she murmured. But it's not just her listening. The entire household listens to her, even when she isn't speaking. At dinner she barely eats, yet nothing escapes her notice. She sits at the head of the long, narrow table in the servants' hall. Not the butler. He sits opposite, yes, and carves the meat, but the true energy of the room flows from her presence. When she folds her napkin, conversation dips. When she lifts her teacup, forks pause mid-air. A joke is told, something about the footman and the upstairs maid. Not inappropriate, just careless. You see her eyes flick up. The air chills slightly. The laughter dies. She doesn't reprimand, she doesn't raise her voice, but the message is unmistakable. This is not the place for that. You're starting to realize something else, something more unsettling. The staff have dreams. They talk late at night about saving wages, about marrying, about perhaps opening a shop or writing letters to cousins in Canada. But the housekeeper, no one speaks of her past. No one mentions a Mr. Anything. No children, no village she returns to. She arrived here before most of them, and she will likely remain long after they're gone. And when you look into her room, just a small bed, a single rug, a cabinet of starched aprons, you realise she has sacrificed everything unnecessary, because a house with a mistress and a master is just a residence, but a house with a housekeeper like her, that's a kingdom, and hers is flawless. It's the fourth week when you finally witness something rare, the housekeeper dealing with both the master and the mistress within the same hour. You've just finished dusting the banisters for the second time because the first time didn't show intention, whatever that means, and you're heading past the drawing room when you hear it. The gentle rustle of silk skirts followed by the sharper tread of polished leather shoes. The master and mistress are both home and they're disagreeing. I told you the curtains were to be drawn in the morning room, the mistress snaps. Her voice is delicate, like porcelain with a hairline crack. And I told you, the master growls, that the fire should not be lit until after luncheon. We're not heating the entire house just to impress the vicar's wife. There's a pause, then a soft knock on the door frame. The housekeeper doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't rush. She simply appears. Black bombazine dress, pressed to perfection, notebook in hand, and says, "Shall I proceed with the afternoon schedule, or would you prefer to review the week's expenditures first?" And just like that, the tension dissolves. The mistress sighs, gathers a shawl. The master mutters something under his breath and disappears toward the study. The housekeeper offers neither sympathy nor scolding. She doesn't take sides, but in that small moment, you saw what no guest ever does. She didn't just serve them, she handled them. Later, in the still room, the kitchen maid confirms it. She keeps the mistress calm and the master civilized. Without her, they'd be hosting dinner parties in the coal cellar. It's not far from the truth, because while the lady of the house gives the orders and the gentleman signs the checks, it's the housekeeper who manages the 1,000 invisible threads between them. The mistress may choose the fabric for the guest room curtains, but it's the housekeeper who oversees their hanging, who ensures the drapery cords match the tassels, who reminds the upholsterer not to arrive during afternoon tea. She keeps track of the mistress's temper. Subtle things like how many drops of lavender water go into her bath, or how many times she changes her gloves before settling on a pair. She also monitors the master's habits. When he wants his brandy, which cigar he prefers, whether the footman should speak or simply wait. She memorizes every rhythm because knowing is controlling and control is the cornerstone of her world. It's a kind of dance, and she leads with invisible steps. And while the lady of the house may flutter and the gentleman may thunder, she is the one who ensures no door slams, no vase falls, no servant gets caught in the crossfire. The staff call it steering the storm, and she does it without a ripple. But what's most fascinating is how she adjusts herself like clockwork between them, not just in behaviour but in tone, in language, in posture. With the mistress, she speaks in soft, measured phrases, always with a faint touch of warmth, as if every sentence were polished like the family silver. "Yes, madam. I believe the lace collar complements the gown beautifully. The lilies arrived early this morning, madam. Shall I have them arranged with the white roses?" But with the master, the rhythm changes. Fewer pleasantries, more precision. The wine merchant confirmed delivery at 2. The new boots have been aired and the soles waxed. There's a briskness to her voice, but never disrespect. She's a mirror reflecting exactly what's needed back at them. You see it again when the mistress grows weepy over a letter from her sister. The entire house seems to hold its breath, the parlourmaids whisper. The cook pretends to need herbs she doesn't. The butler disappears conveniently into the cellar. But the housekeeper, she glides in with a small tray. Tea, not too strong, 2 shortbread biscuits, and a folded linen handkerchief embroidered with a delicate M. Nothing is said. She doesn't ask, she doesn't prod, she simply knows. And somehow, 20 minutes later, the mistress is writing thank you cards with a more determined hand. You begin to wonder if there's something almost unfair in it, how a woman who technically holds no title can influence the household with such quiet force. But then again, what title would you give her? Head of Operations? Minister of Domestic Stability? Shadow Queen? Because it's not just emotional labour she manages. There's a subtle intelligence in how she paces the day, like a conductor managing a symphony. If the master is in a foul mood, the staff is redirected to duties away from the main corridor. The squeaky hinge on the library door is fixed before he notices it. The dogs are walked precisely during his writing hour, never barking, never muddy. If the mistress is due for guests, the scent of fresh lilacs is placed subtly in the hallway. The newest maid, who tends to mumble, is assigned to polished doorknobs instead of serving tea, and if the mistress misplaces her brooch again, it will have already been laid out in a velvet tray by the time she asks for it. None of it is ordered, none of it is questioned, it just happens. And here's the strangest part. Neither master nor mistress ever thank her. Not because they're unkind, but because in their world, the house simply runs as if by magic, as if the hearth stokes itself, the tea steeps on cue and the larder is always full. But you know the truth now. You've seen the lists, the ledgers, the keys. You've seen her lift the mistress's mood with the placement of a cushion and keep the master from exploding over a missing hat by producing it, already brushed and waiting before he even thinks to call for it. She is the nerve centre of this house, not flashy, not loud, but constant, capable, indispensable, and if either of them were to try to replace her, well, that's a story no one wants to tell twice. You don't realise you're at the bottom of the chain until you try to do something helpful. It starts innocently enough. The kitchen maid asks you to fetch a clean apron from the laundry room. You nod, eager to please. Your hands are still sore from yesterday's scouring, but your pride is intact. You rush down the hallway, find the door, and it's unlocked for once. You step inside. That was your first mistake. The housekeeper appears before you've even touched the linen shelf. You didn't hear her approach. You never do. One moment, you're standing in the quiet scent of starch and steam, and the next, she's there, shadow falling across the tiles. Her expression doesn't change. She doesn't yell, but you feel it. The shift in air pressure, like a storm gathering without thunder. Who gave you permission to enter? Your tongue trips. You manage a whisper about the kitchen maid. She says nothing. Her eyes drop to the apron in your hand, and then with the gentlest motion, she closes the cupboard. You are not told by me, and that's it. No raised voice, no slap on the wrist, just a recalibration of your place. Later, the kitchen maid pulls you aside. You have to ask her first, always her, even if it's just a rag for the floor. You nod, pretending you understand, but truthfully, you're still reeling. Because it isn't that you were wrong to help, it's that you broke the order. And in this house, order is everything. The structure is like a skeleton, hard, precise, unbending. At the top of the service world is the housekeeper, beneath her the butler, then the cook, then senior maids, junior maids, tweenies, and finally you. You're the marrow of the bones, necessary but invisible. You see it during meal times. The housekeeper gets first pick of the staff dinner, not the butler, not the cook. Her chair sits slightly raised, her plate placed with care. The scullery maid once tried to serve herself before the housekeeper arrived. She was reassigned to ashpit duty for a week. Then there's the chalkboard outside the scullery. Every morning, names are listed with duties in perfect copperplate. You learn to scan for your own name, never daring to hope for anything other than floors or stove black. But the housekeeper's handwriting tells you more than just tasks. If your name is underlined, she's watching you. If it's smudged, someone else wrote it, and that's a mystery in itself. No one questions it, not even the butler. He manages the wine, the guests, the cigars. But she manages you. One day he passes you in the hallway and says softly, "Best keep in her good books. She forgets nothing." Then he straightens his gloves and vanishes up the stairs. You wonder if she has an actual book, a real one, hidden somewhere with your name in it, with notes beside it. You try not to think about it when you're sweeping the back steps, but every time she looks at you for a moment too long, you wonder what's being written in her mind and how long it will stay there. You begin to understand how the chain works, how every word, every task, every flicker of expression travels through a web of glances and silences. But there's no map on the wall, no diagram of who reports to whom. It's all felt, and the housekeeper is the pulse at the centre of it. She doesn't shout instructions down corridors. She barely speaks. But when she places her pen beside the task list in the morning, everyone reads it like scripture. No one questions why the chimney brushes have been moved. No one asks why the parlourmaid's duties suddenly include polishing all brass fixtures twice. They just do. And when someone doesn't, you learn about that too. On your 5th Thursday, the new scullery lad, fresh from another house full of grins and stories, decides he's too good to carry coal buckets. Says, "It's girls' work." He says it once, loudly. By noon, he's been reassigned to lavatory duty, not just any lavatories, the ones outside used by the gardeners. And the housekeeper, she doesn't say a word to him, she just watches as the butler delivers the message. Her hands stay clean, her authority doesn't. By supper, he's quiet. By Sunday, he's gone. No explanation. Just silence and an empty plate at the far end of the table. Spoke out of turn, the tweenie whispers. Didn't respect the chain. That's when you finally grasp the invisible truth. This isn't just a house. It's a living system, one in which every gesture from her trickles downward. And when she adjusts her spectacles or taps a fingernail against the banister, the entire staff shifts. Meals change. Uniforms tighten, conversations stall, but there's more to it than fear. You begin to see that her control is laced with responsibility. She doesn't just discipline, she protects. You're behind her one morning when the footman stumbles while carrying a tray of porcelain teacups. He pales. The crash never comes, but the clatter is loud enough to rattle every rib in his chest. The butler opens his mouth, about to chastise, but the housekeeper steps in first. "Too much wax on that tile," she says simply. "See that it's repolished with care. No blame, just correction." The footman nods gratefully. The butler closes his mouth. You realise in that moment that her authority isn't about dominance. It's about stability. Every decision she makes, from where the shoe polish is kept to how the staff passes one another on the stairs, is calculated to keep the machine running without friction. And when it does run smoothly, when the toast is warm, the silver shines and no one slams a door, it's her success. Even if no one says it aloud. Especially then. You ask the tweenie how long the housekeeper's been here. "No one knows," she whispers. "She was already here when the old master lived. Some say she came with the house." You laugh. Then you stop, because maybe she did. By the time your 6th week rolls around, you've noticed something curious. Meals don't just appear. They're orchestrated, not by the cook, though she barks orders and flings ladles like a general with a gravy-stained apron, and not by the footman who ferry dishes to and fro with the solemnity of undertakers. No, the true conductor of this culinary symphony is the housekeeper, and it starts with the menu. Every Sunday evening, just as the last lamp is snuffed and the house exhales into quiet, she retreats to her little writing table with a stub of pencil and a sheaf of crinkled receipts. The menu book appears. brown leather, soft at the edges, from years of turning. Inside, a neat grid of days, meals, courses. You've seen her study it like a chessboard. Monday, mutton, of course. Always mutton. It's tradition, something about economy and digestion. Tuesday brings haddock or salt pork, depending on what the fishmonger delivers. Thursday is roast pigeon or goose, if the season allows. And Sunday, well, that's roast beef, puddings, and the kind of stewed apples that make even the cook stand a little taller when they're served. But none of it is decided by whim. The housekeeper cross-references what's in the larder, what the mistress prefers, what the master will tolerate, and crucially, what's about to go off, because waste is a sin in this house. If 3 eggs are on the edge of spoiling, they appear miraculously in Monday's custard. If a heel of bread is growing stale, it becomes a baked pudding dusted with nutmeg. She knows not only what's been eaten but what wasn't. That untouched pork chop on Thursday, it's noted. The second helping of stewed tomatoes, also noted. One day you're in the still room when she walks in holding a jug of milk. She sniffs it once, frowns, and pours it into a side pan. Curdled. Use it for scones, she says before moving on without waiting for acknowledgement. And when the butcher sends the wrong cut of beef, you hear her correct him through the back window, voice even and unbothered, as though she's commenting on the weather. This is sirloin, not flank. You'll take it back. You'll deliver proper flank by noon, and if it's late again, we'll speak to Mr. Hartwell instead. He apologises 3 times before leaving. She doesn't raise an eyebrow. You realise this isn't just about food. It's about balance. She's feeding the family, yes, but she's also feeding the staff, managing budget, avoiding spoilage, calculating morale. When the mistress has a luncheon, the menu must be dainty. Watercress sandwiches, jellied tongue, gooseberry tarts that won't stain gloves. But the very same day, the scullery staff is fed leftover stew bulked with barley and onion ends. The guests never know. The staff never complain because no one goes hungry under her watch. And on the rare occasion when there's a treat, like a honey cake from the village fair, it's she who cuts it. She who chooses who gets a sliver, and she who tucks the last wedge into a linen cloth and stores it in her own drawer, probably for the gardener's boy who lost his mother last winter, probably for someone who never even asks. That's the kind of power she has, the power to nourish quietly. The deeper you sink into the rhythm of the household, the more you understand that food here is more than sustenance. It's currency, discipline, reward, and diplomacy all at once. And the housekeeper, she's the banker, the judge, and the secret dispenser of mercy. You notice it first with the jam. There are 3 kinds: gooseberry, raspberry, and blackcurrant. The mistress favours raspberry, of course. The master likes none. He thinks preserves are for children and invalids. But among the staff, the gooseberry is the rarest, tart, golden, and made in only 1 batch a year. You've never seen it on the servants' table until one morning after a particularly rough week. The tweenie, exhausted, pale, and clearly fighting a cold, finds a piece of toast already laid out for her. Gooseberry jam glistening on top. No one says a word, but everyone notices. Later, when the housekeeper walks by, she doesn't even look in the tweenie's direction. She simply taps the bell pull and moves on as if nothing had happened. Then there's the curious case of the apples. One Wednesday, a basket arrives from the orchard more than usual, green and sour and not fit for eating raw. Cook mutters about poor quality, but the housekeeper doesn't complain. That evening, a dozen apple pies appear. 2 are sent upstairs. The rest are sliced carefully for the staff. The scullery maid whispers, she's calming the house. And she is, because the family is tense. The master is awaiting news on an investment. The mistress has been brooding over some slight at last week's luncheon. Voices have been sharper, doors closing louder. But with pie, there's quiet. Sugar settles what tempers can't. And when the undergardener complains that the kitchen won't give him tea biscuits anymore, you watch her fix it without a word. The next day, a tin is quietly placed in the greenhouse, marked for tools. Only he finds it. Everyone pretends not to know. But the most surprising moment comes on a bleak Friday when the rain hasn't stopped for days and the washing won't dry and the entire house smells like damp wool and despair. You're dragging a bucket down the back stairs when she intercepts you? She says nothing, just hands you a steaming mug, rich sweet tea with a dash of nutmeg. No one else is around. You blink, stammer a thank you. She nods, turns and walks away. It's only later, while mopping the parlour floor, that it hits you. She must have remembered how soaked you got fetching coal that morning. She must have noticed the slight tremble in your fingers. And in a house where everything has a schedule, where every ounce of butter is measured, where eggs are logged and tea leaves counted, she made an exception for you. Not because she's soft, but because she sees everything. Because in her hands, a menu isn't just a list of meals. It's a ledger of emotions. It tells her who's tired, who's tense, who's worth encouraging. The cook may wield the spoon, but she decides who's fed and when and why. You thought cleaning had an end, a beginning, a middle, a shiny result, and then it's done. You were wrong. Here, under the watchful eye of the housekeeper, cleaning isn't an act. It's a state of being, a cycle with no end. There's a chart pinned on the inside of the still room door, inked by hand, updated weekly. Not just a list of chores, but a calendar of cleanliness. Monday is for mutton and mantelpieces. Tuesday for hearths and hinges. Wednesday windows and stair rods. Thursday is for the lesser used rooms like the library. No one visits, but it must always be immaculate in case the vicar or the mistress's cousin comes calling. And Friday? Friday is floors. Every floor, even the ones no one walks on. You're sent that morning to scrub the rear corridor, the one leading to the game larder. It's not part of the regular path. No carpets, cold flagstone slabs. You ask just once if it's necessary. The housekeeper looks at you for a moment, as though calculating whether the question is ignorance or rebellion. Then she replies, "If it exists, it's cleaned." You never ask again. There's something relentless about the way she schedules it all. Not a single room is left to chance. The brass bedposts in the guest room are polished every 11 days, whether someone's staying or not. The banister spindles are wiped down on the first and third Thursday. The ceiling cornices, once a month, with a brush wrapped in flannel tied to a broom handle. She's memorised the schedule. Doesn't need to look. You suspect she does it anyway, just to make certain everyone else remembers. She never forgets a thing. And when the lady of the house decides, purely on impulse, to arrange a musical evening in the parlour, it's the head housekeeper who orders a complete shine of the piano, new starch for the drapes, and oil for the lamp chains. All finished within a single day. No objections, no extra pay, simply completed. You once heard her call the house a living creature that must be protected from rot. At the moment, it sounded almost romantic. Now, it sounds like absolute fact, because you've witnessed what occurs when something gets overlooked. One week, the fresh housemaid neglects to dust the trim above the dining hall entrance. Just a single time. Nobody catches it during the meal, not the household, not the visitors. But the head housekeeper does. She positions herself in the doorway the following morning, looks upward and remains silent. The girl gets moved to stove cleaning for the remainder of the week. That very afternoon the dusting brushes get replaced, and everyone understands exactly why. It's not meanness, it's expectations. Because tidiness isn't simply about grime, it's about order, authority, standing. When the metal loses its shine, the house appears worn. When a window ledge shows streaks, the mistress appears negligent. And if anybody discovers a spider's thread near the tall clock, it's not the servant who receives blame, it's her. The head housekeeper carries it all without complaint, so she makes certain nothing ever requires explanation. But here's where it becomes genuinely frightening. Even the elements don't give you reprieve on a rainy afternoon. Your shining shoes inside by flickering light, with scarcely enough air circulation to properly breathe. Ice forming outside. That's when the metal door handles freeze against your skin. And during summer, when perspiration makes your cap slide and your fabric clings to your limbs, that's when you're instructed to wash the conservatory glass on both surfaces. The head housekeeper doesn't reduce the pace, she increases the cleaning. You once overheard the head butler grumble that an untidy house welcomes disorder, and though he likely intended it as humour, you now believe she treats it as doctrine. Even the hearths must be cleaned and examined each week, even in chambers that haven't held a fire in ages. She drags her fingertip across the shelf, vision focused. If it emerges grey, somebody's identity appears on the assignment board. If it emerges spotless, she gives a single nod. No commendation, merely a nod. And somehow that acknowledgement feels superior to verbal appreciation. She dictates not simply what gets cleaned, but the method. There's a proper technique to shine a door handle. Revolving movements, 3 full minutes per metal fixture, completing with a dry fabric wrapped around the smallest finger to brighten the detailed areas. You were never instructed in that, but she observed the initial time you performed it incorrectly. She didn't utter a single word, simply placed the handle to one side. And the following day, you discovered yourself assigned to every handle in the western section. By the 5th one, you had mastered it, and she was aware. There are stories among the workers that she once detected a smudge on a portrait frame from opposite the corridor, that she can identify candle residue on a ceiling without even raising her gaze, that she maintains awareness of which floor coverings have been rotated and the timing, not through written records, but through recollection. Initially it all seems unreasonable, even harsh, but then you observe the outcome. The house radiates brilliance. Visitors praise the atmosphere, the purity, the sensation of the residence. Even the mistress appears more relaxed when she walks without shoes through the breakfast room and discovers not a particle of debris under her foot. The master never speaks about it, but you observe he never adjusts the service cord anymore. His grooming table stays arranged precisely as he prefers it. And in the lower level, the workers might complain, but they function like precision machinery. There's cadence in the washing, satisfaction in the brightening, and most unexpectedly, silent contentment in securing her acknowledgement, because that's what nobody mentions to you. Her expectations transform into your expectations. You discover yourself straightening table linens twice, examining your image in the copper cookware, pressing the borders of the hand cloths, even though nobody's requested you to. You start to invest yourself, and that's the moment you comprehend her influence. She doesn't command through consequences or dread, though both remain like dim presences. She commands through anticipation, and once you've achieved it, you refuse to descend beneath it, not ever once more. Because in her reality there is no concept of simply tidy, there is only proper. There are no leather straps in this residence, no shouting, no forcefully shut entries. But if you question the workers what frightens them most, they won't mention rodents or the master's anger, or even the rear stairway. During tempestuous evenings when the lights waver and the stairs become slippery, they'll mention her quietness. Because when the head housekeeper expresses disapproval, she doesn't vocalize, she observes. And it's that observation, piercing as sour liquid, frigid as buffed stone, that will have even the head butler double-checking the cloth arrangements. You witness it personally, the initial time you make an error. The lady's undergarments folded the incorrect manner. You weren't aware there was a proper manner. Nobody informed you. But when the compartment was accessed later that afternoon and an edge protruded half an inch outward, she caught it. She didn't speak. Your identity? Didn't note your assignment board, didn't exhale heavily. She simply corrected it gradually, meticulously, then closed the compartment with a single fingertip. The following morning, your identity was positioned beside the washing schedule for 7 days. No verbal address, no reprimand, simply duty assignment. And somehow it wounded more than any verbal correction. Others mention comparable accounts. The male servant who attempted to whistle in the passageway never shouted toward, simply positioned on exterior responsibilities until the practice disappeared. The servant who displayed eye movement during evening cleanup discovered herself assigned to preparing cleaning agent for 3 consecutive days. The youngest helper who neglected to bow to the mistress, not disciplined but refused sweet cake at Sunday afternoon tea. That was the most severe one. You recall it clearly. The serving dish bypassed her completely. The head housekeeper didn't even look toward her, and yet every individual at the dining surface sat somewhat more upright following that. It's control in traditional dress. Calculated, subtle, crushing. You question yourself, how does she sustain such command without elevating her volume? The response is straightforward. She's constantly observing. You start to challenge it. Once, momentarily. One late afternoon, you reduce your speed, cleaning the entrance hall floor tiles. It's an insignificant thing, a brief pause. You allow your hand to relax. She doesn't materialize. You complete and proceed downward to the cooking area, believing perhaps you avoided detection. But when you access your storage space to retrieve your cap, inside rests a creased note. Entrance hall requires second cleaning tomorrow morning, marked with her identifying letters in that precise angled handwriting. No frustration, no theatrics, simply exactness. And that's what makes it penetrate deeply. It isn't about public shaming, it's about amendment. She maintains the expectation so firmly, so unchangeably, that even the workers start to impose it among their own group. The experienced servants instruct the less experienced ones with disciplined attention. The head cook glares when somebody places down a utensil with excessive force. The head butler remeasures the distance of the candle holders, not because they dread consequences, but because she has moulded them. And in an unusual manner, that control transforms into a form of reassurance, a pattern. You understand precisely what's required. You understand where the boundary exists. You understand that provided you maintain it, the house will operate smoothly and nothing will collapse. Even if she never states well completed, even if she only acknowledges once when your compartment finally rests level and aligned, that acknowledgement, it's complete validation. You start to recognize something additional, something that advances gradually, like vapor ascending from a heated pot. The head housekeeper doesn't simply correct errors, she avoids them. It's the manner she traverses the corridors just before the workers descend for the evening meal, dragging her covered fingertip across a secondary table, or verifying the positioning of the mistress's house shoes. It's how she looks once at the rear entrance fastening and you instantly recall you neglected to secure it the previous night. Her influence isn't in her words, it's in what she doesn't need to verbalize. Even the head butler, who is technically her equivalent, responds to her signals. You witness him modifying his formal vest after she inclines her head ever so minimally during a household dinner. Not a syllable is transferred, but the communication is transparent and followed. She corrects through self-respect. That's the genius of it. No emotional outbursts, no mockery, no frantic behaviour. Only results. Tidy, silent, and nearly imperceptible. But there are murmurs. Accounts exchanged between cooking area partitions and creased work garments. Narratives of the previous housemaid who once attempted to respond defiantly, who muttered that the head housekeeper believed she was aristocracy, not workers. She was transferred to the upper floor within moments. By the conclusion of 7 days, she'd departed. Nobody compelled her, nobody uttered a syllable. The residents simply enclosed around her, frigid as stone, and when somebody questioned where she travelled, the pattern disrupted. The cadence is the only response anyone provides, because that's the reality of it. isn't it? A cadence, a rhythm, a subdued, constant vibration beneath every action in the residence. And she is the timekeeper. One evening, following a especially extended day of metal brightening and aching knees, you capture a reflection in the shoe chamber-looking glass. Your expression is coloured, your work garment creased, but your neckline, flawless. You didn't even consider it, not deliberately, but somehow before descending the stairs for the evening meal, you modified it precisely as she would have desired. That's when comprehension strikes you. She doesn't need to elevate her volume because she is already within your thoughts. Her acknowledgement has transformed into the standard by which you evaluate your personal effort. Her expectations have transformed into your expectations. You observe others for indications of the same condition, and it's present, subtle but expanding. The manner the junior servant re-wipes a surface she already cleaned. The manner the youngest helper flattens her cap decoration twice before accessing the sitting room. They all dread her disapproval, but they desire her regard because a single acknowledgement from the head housekeeper feels like receiving a reward you weren't aware you were pursuing. Not showy, not audible, simply a silent recognition that you're component of the apparatus. Dependable, trustworthy, spotless. And once you experience it, just once, you'll perform anything not to forfeit it. It's not control anymore, it's dedication. It's a luminous morning when you encounter your most formidable adversary yet. A creased bed covering, not simply any crease, understand. Not the variety that disappears with a pull or vanishes under a cushion. This one is calculated, profound, established, concealing precisely in the middle of the uppermost covering on the mistress's visitor bed. You don't even detect it until after you complete the chamber. Covering secured, edges square, delicate decorative pieces positioned. You retreat, satisfied. For once, the bed appears like something from a fabric promotion. Then she materializes. The head housekeeper. No warning, no indication. Simply the faintest sound of the floor plank behind you and a voice like a current of air. Repeat, you express confusion. She states nothing additional, simply walks forward, applies a fingertip to the covering, and raises it, exposing the crease. It extends across the center like an injury. You sense your ears become warm. You acknowledge clumsily, start to release, hands trembling. No urgency, she states almost gently, but don't cease until it rests flat by nature. You reconstruct the bed 4 separate times. You discover that morning what everyone else in the residence already understands. The fabric examination is the ultimate evaluation of temperament. It's not simply the covering, it's the cushions, expanded uniformly on both surfaces. The blanket creased precisely 3 hand measurements beneath the headboard. The decorated borders are aligned, the edges firm enough to rebound a small coin, and if anything sags, gathers, or reveals a fold, she'll locate it. They mention she once declined an entire bed because a single strand, one solitary thread, had been trapped between the cushion and the covering. Nobody detected it, but she did. It's infuriating. You smooth, you flatten, you press with your hands until your finger joints ache. And still she positions in the entrance, silent. You can't determine if she's content. You don't attempt to question. But on the 5th attempt, she departs without remark. And that's how you understand you've succeeded, just marginally. Later that afternoon, the washing chamber becomes your combat zone. Massive stacks of white fabrics tower on every area. Cushion covers, undergarments, cloth squares, all pressed, starched, flattened. And she examines every single one. Not by raising them, absolutely not. She drags her hand across the upper layer. If the borders aren't matched, if the stack tilts, if one cloth square is creased with its emblem slightly away from center, it's all dismantled, reconstructed. The stack must be reassembled. And, mercy assist you, if a fold extends diagonally, the starching is more severe. There's a specific shine she requires. Not damp, not rigid, simply the suggestion of firmness. Sufficient that a tablecloth will descend with mass, but never crease, even beneath a candle stand. You discover her evaluation. She strikes the fabric with one fingertip. If it produces a gentle crack, it succeeds. If not, return to the press. Once, the head cook suggests that if she had her preference, the atmosphere would be pressed. The head housekeeper doesn't respond with humour, simply modifies a fold and departs. Because to her, washing isn't simply washing, it's demonstration evidence. If the fabrics are flawless, then the household is flawless. And if the fabrics are inadequate, then she has not succeeded, and she never ever fails to succeed. You begin to perceive the deeper reality. Every crease is a challenge to her command. A mark, a droop, an improperly creased cloth square. These aren't simply errors, they're defects in the arrangement. And her arrangement must remain immaculate. If the residence is an orchestra, then the fabrics are the string instruments, always prepared, always monitored, always under tension. She verifies them with the gravity of a religious figure handling sacred objects. One morning, you detect her in the visitor chamber, straightening the border of a delicate bedspread with the boundary of her covered hand, as though providing blessing. She modifies a single fold, then retreats. One acknowledgement then disappeared. That's her method. Access, amend, disappear, like a breeze that carries faintly of starch and authority. But the genuine evaluation isn't in the creasing, it's in the drying process. The drying area exists out behind, positioned behind the shrub barriers and protected from observation. Extended cords stretch between substantial posts, and on favourable days the fabrics wave like satisfied flags of a miniature realm. On unfavourable days, rainy ones, frigid ones, breezy ones, they droop. And when they droop, they crease. And when they crease, well, you already understand the remainder. Once, a male servant was discovered bringing in the washing before it dried completely, simply to prevent a tempest. His haste created faint, moist folds. The head housekeeper discovered them before the pressing even started. He wasn't corrected openly, but the subsequent time he assisted dinner, he was reduced to removing soup vessels instead of slicing. That's her method of operation. Her command flows downward, imperceptible, but universal. She even controls scent. There's a particular aroma fabrics are intended to possess. Daylight, starch, perhaps floral essence if the period permits. Anything else? A trace of dampness, cleaning agent excessively potent, even a suggestion of coal vapour. And she'll be aware. And she'll follow it directly to you. You start to manage coverings like they're precious paper. You observe how she creases, one hand maintaining the edge taut, the other straightening downward with two fingertips, like she's applying recollection into fabric. She's instructed the remainder of the workers too. The head cook won't dispatch upward a tablecloth unless it's beyond her examination. The head butler yields to her when positioning cloth squares. Even the mistress once questioned whether the delicate table runners had that proper firmness. And the reply? They possess it now. Madam, nothing additional. One day you discover her alone in the washing chamber. The precipitation outside is striking and the cords remain vacant. She's positioned at the surface, rotating over an aged handcloth with identifying letters stitched so faintly they're nearly disappeared in the pattern. She's not examining it, she's recalling it. Belonged to the previous lady, she states quietly. Maintained it for her grooming surface. Used to question if the emblem faced forward. She creases it, positions it carefully into the lower compartment and secures it. That's when you comprehend the fabrics aren't simply cloth, they're chronicle. Recollection evidence that somebody somewhere invested the effort to perform something appropriately. And her responsibility, her purpose, is to safeguard that one fold at a time. You've invested weeks buried in the internal operations of the residence, cleaning, creasing, washing, when you finally uncover another dimension of her influence, the entrance point. Not the magnificent front entry, naturally, That's for the household, for visitors, for transportation and invitations and courteous falsehoods spoken over tea. No, the entry that concerns you is the worker's access, a modest, solid frame positioned behind the shrub barrier where the deliveries materialize and the genuine negotiations occur. And who positions at the center of that network? The head housekeeper. She dictates the movement of individuals and merchandise like an experienced guardian. Not the head butler, despite his elaborate neckpiece. Not the head cook, despite red-faced bluster. They're occupied performing. She's occupied selecting who receives permission to access the domain. The seafood vendor materializes at 7 every Tuesday, precipitation or brightness. He carries the scent of brine and narratives and believes he's appealing, but the head housekeeper never displays pleasure. He transfers the bundle. She unwraps it with fingertips like surgical instruments. One look and she understands if the fish is a day excessively aged. She states nothing, simply raises an eyebrow. He blinks, starts explaining. She listens. Then she states, "Mr. Harrow's fish arrived fresher the previous week. That's all. And the subsequent week the fish is flawless. No additional excuses." You position just inside the washing area entry, pretending to wash a vessel, and you comprehend vendors dread her. Later that afternoon, the produce vendor appears with fruit damaged on one surface. She declines the entire container, doesn't even contact it, simply states no and closes the entry. He positions there for 3 complete seconds before moving away, container in hand, expressing apologies to the gravel. You discover rapidly that nothing accesses the residence unless she authorizes it. Not the bread, not the candles, not the beeswax, brightening substance. Even the postal carrier receives an examination when correspondence materializes for a previous servant, redirected, but with the previous identity scratched away. She intercepts it, accesses it, reads it, expresses disapproval, then incinerates it in the fireplace. "You don't desire her being pulled back into that," she murmurs, mostly to herself. You never discover what that was, but you start to perceive the silent force of her position, not in striking or shouting, in screening, determining what the residence observes and what it doesn't. That encompasses individuals too. The shoeboy once attempted to sneak his relative in for a visit, simply a moment. At the rear entry, a foolish errand. The relative never advanced past the shrub. She doesn't authorize. "Unfamiliar people," the youngest helper whispers. She detects them. You respond with humor until you comprehend no unfamiliar person has ever remained here extensively. She can detect dishonesty like others detect moisture. She screens more than merchandise, she screens standing. You witness it when the clergyman's wife makes an unexpected visit one morning. The mistress is still in her mourning garment, her hair partially arranged. But somehow, in the duration of 10 minutes, the sitting room is ventilated, a tea arrangement materializes. The mistress is dressed, and the window ledge carries faintly of purple water. Because the head housekeeper had already heard the sound of the clergyman's carriage at the entrance, she'd dispatched the youngest helper forward before the bell even sounded. She doesn't respond. She avoids the requirement to respond. And that's genuine influence. But the entrance point isn't simply about preventing what's unwanted. It's also about selecting what's deserving to arrive in. You observe it most transparently with the tradesman, the candle producer, the shoe mender, the dairy youth with his unstable cart of cream containers and cheese circles. When they materialize, they don't address the head cook. They certainly don't request the master. They request her. And she doesn't accelerate. She examines the foundations of the new shoes, the solidity of the cheese, the aroma of the beeswax. She pays attention to mass stitching completion. And once, when the dairyman neglects to refrigerate the cream overnight, she doesn't instruct him, she simply transfers it back. Silent, conclusive. 2 weeks later, he materializes with double the quantity packed in ice with a fabric secured over the cover. He inclines his head and doesn't produce the same error once more. Even maintenance personnel must succeed in her evaluation. When the lamp cord in the breakfast room flickers one winter's evening, the mistress requests it mended. The head housekeeper organises the visit, but she positions watch the complete duration. The individual operates, limbs crossed, vision piercing. He questions nothing, doesn't attempt, and when he's completed, she walks forward, evaluates the cord personally, and only then allows him compensation. It's unusual the household upstairs wouldn't identify the lamp technician's appearance, but the head housekeeper, she understands the identities of his offspring and how much grain cost this month. Not because she's compassionate, though she may be, but because knowledge is authority. She controls the perception of the residents as intensely as she controls its fabrics. The front barrier squeaks once, and she applies oil before the master observes. The flower shrub near the worker's entry weakens in the warmth, and she waters it, not for aesthetics, but because dying vegetation reflects inadequately on the sequence of the residence. She dictates the very perception of the household. When the mistress receives company, you witness it in operation. The manner the visitor cloths are suspended, just a touch more upright. The tea pastries are following half an hour, more recent. The flowers transition from humble to abundant, never excessive, but sufficient to indicate refinement. And when a visitor departs, she observes from behind the fabric, calculating how extensively the farewell continues on the entrance step. That informs her all she requires to understand about how it proceeded. The mistress never questions, she doesn't need to. The head housekeeper leaves no indication of the visitor behind, no fragments, no fragrance, no reverberations. The instant they're departed, the sitting room is restored to its standard flawlessness. One evening, you overhear her addressing the head butler in the passageway. He references a particular household rumoured to be arriving for the evening meal. She simply responds, "We'll utilise the secondary finest metal. They'll observe it, but won't comprehend why." And that's when comprehension arrives to you. The head housekeeper doesn't simply control the residence, she arranges it, like an artist organising a gallery. She dictates the illumination, the aroma, the sound, the narrative the residence communicates. She's not simply protecting the entrance point, she's protecting the account. And every individual who crosses into this residence, whether transporting meat or wearing a silk neckpiece, is component of her composition. Authorized, organized, calculated for. You don't intend to observe the record book? It's not concealed precisely, simply never contacted. It exists on the secondary shelf in the head housekeeper's chamber, bound in gentle brown leather, its edges worn smooth. You've cleaned near it, passed it 100 occasions. But one grey morning, when she advances out for a delivery and you're dispatched in to return a stack of creased fabrics, the entry sounds, access, and the record book rests there, accessed on her surface. Simply one page visible, ink still glistening. You pause just to look, and suddenly is not what you anticipate. Not columns of metalware or cleaning agent purchases, not fabric inventories or wax calculations. No, it's individuals. A roster of identities, some recognizable current workers, others you've never heard of. And next to each identity, dates, brief notes, unusual phrases departed after siblings' marriage, returned shoes in satisfactory condition, dismissed quietly, correspondence from male servants, unwise, excessively gentle for washing area, advanced to storage, flourishes. It's not critical, it's not even sentimental. It's observed, examined, personal. She doesn't simply follow what the residence requires, she follows who the residence is. You barely have duration to read additional before you hear her footsteps. You straighten instantly, heart leaping into your throat. But when she accesses, she doesn't reprimand, doesn't even appear surprised. She simply moves past you, looks at the access page, then rotates it gradually, intentionally, and closes the covering. "You're inquisitive," she states. "You acknowledge, uncertain if it's a trap. She examines you, unreadable, then states, "That's not a record book. That's recollection." And in that instant something transforms, a covering withdraws. She understands everything about this residence, and not simply the chambers or the schedules. She understands you, where you position, where you struggle, where you excel. The record book isn't about surveillance, it's about continuation. Because every household relies on more than brightening and pastry. It relies on individuals, and she's the only one maintaining tracking of who's deteriorating at the boundaries. Later, you observe her in the corridor. She ceases beside the new male servant, observes the wear on his neckline. She addresses the head cook with a gentle phrase about lighter pastry next occasion. Hands are exhausted. She passes the groundskeeper and questions after his sibling by identity. Each conversation is a connection, tiny, silent, securing the residents together. You comprehend, too, that the mistress doesn't maintain records like this. The master doesn't observe when a shoeboy limps or when the junior servant neglects to secure her fastener. They exist in a brightened whirl above the chaos. But the head housekeeper, she walks the boundaries, she observes, and that produces all the distinction. Once you've witnessed the record book, you start to observe things distinctly, like how no confrontation ever seems to erupt here, only disappear quietly before it has an opportunity to distribute. You recall the junior servant who used to express dissatisfaction while washing? One morning her container is transferred. She's suddenly brightening metal in the quiet chamber, close enough to overhear the head butler's humour and the male servant's compliments. Within 7 days, she's humming as she operates. Or the day the washing servant materializes late. Vision red, fabric mismatched. Nobody questions. But that afternoon she's dispatched upstairs to assist with the tea assistants instead of cleaning out the ash containers. A straightforward transition, simply one day. And by evening, her fabric is proper once more. No correction, no questions, simply modifications. You comprehend the record book isn't simply observation, it's approach. She doesn't respond, she forecasts. She observes how individuals deteriorate and reconstructs the fabric before it separates. Some describe it manipulative, others describe it intelligence. Either manner, it operates. You start to believe. She even follows worker connections, not with idle talk, with sequences. Who remains near whom in the workers' chamber? Who modifies positions at the evening meal? Who colours when the shoeboy states good morning? And when something's becoming excessively warm, she intervenes. A modification in responsibilities, a new schedule, a surprise transfer to storage detail. No clarifications, but the communication is transparent. Affection is permitted only if it doesn't interrupt the arrangement. Romantic involvement is acceptable in narratives, not in the fabric storage space. But it's not simply about control, there's a tension in it too. You hear her one day addressing quietly to the head cook. The youngest helper has been delayed all week, awkward with arrangements, forgetful with identities. Position her on simpler responsibilities tomorrow, the head housekeeper states. She's developing, not failing. It's the initial time you've heard her address of somebody's error, with gentleness. And then there are the red notations. You only discover of them through rumour. Each week, when she updates the record book, a few identities are noted in red. Not for correction, for observation. It signifies that individual is approaching something, a collapse point, an attraction, an ailment. The workers describe it being warmed by the pot. If your identity is in red, she's surrounding you, not out of menace, out of preparation. Because when somebody collapses, it's her responsibility to maintain the connections. You start to question if you were ever in red, that occasion you neglected to secure your shoes appropriately, or the week you nearly released the arrangement of crystal drinking glasses, or the afternoon she discovered you positioned too extensively in the quiet chamber, vision heavy, hands inactive. Perhaps she witnessed it, perhaps she noted it, perhaps that's why the subsequent day your responsibilities were quieter, more stable, brightening in the fabric chamber, where nobody interrupts you, where you could regain your breath. And now, as you crease cloth squares and hear her footsteps pass outside the entry, you sense something unfamiliar. Not dread, not tension, safeguarding. She doesn't simply dictate the residence, she protects it. Every individual, every identity, every page. And somehow, even though she rarely displays pleasure, you comprehend you've never sensed more protected by your 12th week. You understand the schedule, the sounds, the brightening, the precise quantity of movements between the washing area and the rear staircase. You function like a component on a surface, each rotation predictable, each motion learned. But then, one morning, something transitions. You discover yourself in the corridor outside the sitting room with a metal arrangement in hand. When you hear it, amusement, not the usual courteous sound from the mistress or the subdued rumble of the master. This is something more gentle, more youthful. You look around the edge. The new junior male servant, barely 18, all luminous vision and elevated expectations, is positioning just a slight bit excessively close to the upstairs servant. She's displaying pleasure, removing lint from his shoulder, gradually, intentionally, and he's not relocating. You retreat. Later, in the quiet chamber, it's all anyone's discussing. They were engaging in romantic interaction. The cooking area servant hisses. In luminous daylight contributes the junior servant near the sitting room entry, whispers the youngest helper, scandalized. But the head housekeeper states nothing. That is, until 3 days later. Suddenly, the upstairs servant is transferred to washing, a temporary requirement. According to the assignment board, the junior male servant dispatched to clean the shoes of the stable workers, distant from the main residence. No instructions, no displays, simply distance, and in the quietness that follows, the communication distributes. Not here, not on her observation. Because while the master may oversee the property, and the mistress may preside over propriety and tea, it is she who protects the residence's standing like a defensive barrier. Romantic involvement among the workers isn't prohibited, precisely, but it is hazardous. One misstep, one correspondence gone astray, one misinterpreted observation, and the complete apparatus sounds with controversy. You discover there was once a parlour servant who received a circular ornament. A humble little thing, nothing incorrect with that, except that it originated from a visitor, an acquaintance of the master, a married individual. Nobody addressed it directly. The ornament disappeared. So did she. The visitor never returned, and the only visible indication was an identity removed from the record book and a position on the cleaning schedule that remained mysteriously vacant for 2 weeks. You start to comprehend that standing in this residence is not something you construct, it's something you sustain, like metal, like brass. And one mark can destroy everything. The head housekeeper's approach is not simply prevention, it's restriction. She detects the initial disturbance of difficulty and flattens it before it transforms into a surge. She positions the experienced workers near the less experienced ones. She rotates timetables so that pairs never develop. She observes where vision drifts during meal intervals. And, if somebody neglects themselves, dispatches a note, remains too extensively at the worker's access, leaves a decoration positioned in the incorrect compartment. It is she who locates it initially, not the mistress, not even the discussing servants. She locates it, and quietly, completely, the difficulty disappears. Some mention she was once in romantic involvement herself, that she trusted a male servant once, long previously, and forfeited everything, but nobody understands for certain if she possesses a damaged heart. It is flattened between starch and record book pages because the residence must remain spotless. And that encompasses the narratives whispered behind closed entries. But idle talk, like residue, constantly discovers its method in through separations in floor planks and whispers down stairwells. And in a residence this massive, with this many footsteps reverberating across brightened floors, quietness is never as complete as she might desire. So the head housekeeper doesn't merely combat idle talk, she redirects it. You notice it the first time, when a tiny scandal almost takes hold. The butler's left boot goes missing. Not both, only one. A puzzle of ridiculous scale. The household stirs. Was it taken? Lost? A joke? Was it the tweenie who's been looking pale these days? Or the undermaid who's never cared for the butler's cutting words? For 2 days the boot stays gone. Rumours simmer like broth, left too long. You hear it at the edges of conversation. Perhaps he said something to the housekeeper. Perhaps she's the one who grabbed it. And just like that, the threads start to unravel. Until the 3rd morning, you discover the missing boot in the warming oven, completely undamaged, scrubbed, shined, resting on a folded cloth. No one admits guilt. But that evening, during dinner, the housekeeper makes a soft announcement. Starting tomorrow, pantry work will shift. The tweenie and the undermaid will answer to the laundry. No word of the boot, no accusation. But the talk changes and the rumours fade. That's how she handles gossip. Not by facing it, but by starving it of air, by shifting the subject, the rhythm, the tension. She understands that scandal is a type of force and it needs to flow somewhere. So she offers it another channel, additional tasks, reassigned hallways, sometimes even a special dessert for dinner, not as prize, but as diversion, a thick, heavy quiet. And should something more pressing arise, like a fight heard between the cook and the housemaid or a shattered teacup discovered beneath the stairs, she resolves it before the family ever senses a change. You once hear her whisper, not to anyone specifically, the mistress must never detect trouble. It spoils the milk. And she believes it. Because she doesn't simply protect the rooms or the schedules. She protects the feeling, the invisible mood of the house, that fragile balance of confidence, obligation and well-greased quiet. Even the master, who barely looks at the staff, seems to move with more assurance when the corridors hum with soft efficiency. Even the mistress, given to anxious nerves and lace-edged migraines, seems brighter when the staff meet her with perfectly timed bows, and no one raises the housemaid's sudden departure. Because the housekeeper doesn't let departures turn into tales. They become roster changes, shift bedding, wordless teachings, and every maid, every boy, every footman understands if you spark trouble, you vanish. Not harshly, not noisily, but completely. It's not discipline, it's revision. Because for her, the house is a text, every voice a piece of speech, every chore a phrase, and her work is to guarantee the story never falters, never blurs, never wanders from the refined tale she spent years creating. You used to assume she simply directed the people. Now you grasp it fully. She directs the myth. And then just like that, the mistress departs in a carriage at sunrise, 2 trunks and a rush of hastily packed scarves. No elaborate journey, just an urgent call to her sister's manor in Surrey. The master stays behind, circling his study like a chained hound, grumbling about tedious letters and property records. You might expect everything would relax, that the demands might lighten. After all, the lady of the house is away. But what unfolds next? The housekeeper strengthens everything. Morning meal times move earlier by 15 minutes. Sheet inspections become daily rather than weekly. Even the servants' hall gets dusted twice. You ask the kitchen maid the reason. She shrugs, because now there's no cushion, and she's correct. Without the mistress to catch the worry and chaos, the entire house now mirrors straight onto the housekeeper. Every groan in the floorboard, every mark on a glass pane, every misplaced spoon. It's her standing that's vulnerable. She wakes earlier, moves quicker, stops talking entirely unless required. And then, one morning, you see something surprising. She's in the drawing room by herself, rearranging pillows. Not merely fixing them, selecting them. A bright floral gets removed, swapped with ivory damask. A vase gets turned slightly, its mouth pointed away from the entrance. And it strikes you. She's arranging now, not just preserving. With the mistress absent, the housekeeper's quietly claiming a sort of visual authority. She doesn't alter anything major, but the touches change subtly, deliberately. The master doesn't remark. He hardly sees it, if at all. But you do, because for the first time, the house feels steadier, not fancier, softer. By day 3, she's managing the master's food directly, with the cook modifying his plate. Less wild game, more white fish. Trading the evening red wine for tea with lemon. She doesn't seek approval, and he doesn't object. In fact, one evening you witness a rare exchange. The housekeeper stands in the study passing the master a sealed letter. He accepts it with a grunt of recognition, looks up and says, "Everything's functioning quite well, I must admit." She bows her head, says nothing, but her hand, you observe, clenches just faintly on her notebook. She's not vain, not smug, but she's conscious, she realises, because this is the moment she's always readied for. With the lady absent, she is the house, and everyone senses it. The staff start to seek her blessing. Instead of the mistresses, the butcher inquires about her choices. The butler starts consulting her about the meal chime. Even the dogs, idle creatures that they are, seem to follow behind her, dress, hem more regularly than before. The pattern doesn't merely endure, it intensifies, because beneath all her stiffness and quiet, this is what she was made for. Command, with no decoration structure, with no frills. But with strength comes strain, and though the housekeeper never falters, you start to notice the cost. It's in the extra moments she stays at the breakfast tray before raising the cloth cover, the way her fingers pause just barely when flipping the page of her notebook. She's taking it all, every timetable, every meal, every murmured grievance the mistress would normally absorb. Because now, when the master asks where the vicar's message has wandered, he doesn't summon his wife, he summons her. When the lamp flame dies in the study, it's she who is called. When the young cousin shows up without warning and needs a guest room prepared within the hour, it's not inform my wife. It's ensure it's finished. And she does, without pause. But you notice how firmly she keeps the walls standing. It's in her walk, still straight, still quick, but with a pressure just behind the knees in her voice, controlled as always but scratching faintly. By evening, even the buttons on her sleeves seem more carefully secured. The staff start to murmur, not with judgment, but with wonder. "She's operating the house alone," says the footman one night. "She always did," says the kitchen maid. Now nobody's acting otherwise. And when the cousin mentions how lovely the rose display appears, not realising it was entirely the housekeeper's work, you watch her mouth twitch almost toward a grin. She gets no recognition, no gratitude, but she doesn't require it, because for her, authority is the only value that counts. But there's one person who seems to sense the shift more than anyone. The master. With his wife away, his temperament changes like the sky. Some days he's withdrawn, gazing into the flames with a frown. Other days he's agitated, stalking, throwing books, shouting commands to nobody specific, and the housekeeper, she never shifts pitch. She addresses him the same way she addresses the fishmonger or the tweenie, steady, sharp, absolute. You hear them once behind the shut study door. "I don't want veal again." A beat. "It's what you requested on Thursday, sir." Another beat. Then well modify it. Quiet. Steps. The door opens. She exits, shows no reaction. But the next day it's lamb on the plate. She doesn't fight, she steers. She doesn't debate. She adjusts because she comprehends the equilibrium better than anyone. She's not attempting to overpower the master, she's maintaining him, keeping the household's pretense whole. But it's not merely a function, it's an act. A constant movement where the rhythm never stops, even when the melody shifts mid-measure. And you wonder, Does she ever relax? Does she ever step into her small room, shut the door, and draw a breath not tied to obligation? One night after dinner, you walk by that door and see the dim flicker of lamplight beneath the gap. No motion, just a radiance inside. You picture her sitting motionless, notebook shut, cup of dark tea cooling at her side, and maybe for just an instant letting her back ease, letting the silence belong to her, not the house's. You'll never inquire and she'll never reveal, but somehow you wish that when the mistress comes back, she'll recognise the burden her housekeeper carried, the exactness, the attention, the triumph, quiet as smoothed linen. And if not, the housekeeper will nod once and continue on. If the house is a platform, and it is always then, the butler is the one in the glow. He opens doors, declares guests, sweeps across the floor like a man born with shine in his blood. The guests notice him. The mistress yields to him. The master nods when he talks. But behind the scenes there's her, the housekeeper, and what no guest ever witnesses, what even the junior staff barely mention, is the frozen conflict that bubbles quietly between them. Not a conflict of yelling or crashed trays that would be beneath them both. No, this is a conflict of lifted eyebrows, of reshuffled chores, of teapots positioned just an inch away from centre to make a statement. You catch it first over a lost wine glass, one from the carved crystal collection normally saved for the master's Thursday dinner. The butler is walking, examining the sideboard twice, then a third pass. He finally summons the kitchen maid. She shrugs and then the housekeeper emerges. "It was taken for cleaning," she says, holding the glass sparkling in a wrapped cloth. "The last time it was touched, the stem had a slight shake. You overlooked it." He accepts it with a stiff nod. No gratitude and no regret. That's how it starts. You begin to notice the rhythms, how the butler claims the front hall flowers are his territory, displayed according to season and balance. Yet somehow, after every display is set, the housekeeper wanders past. Doesn't reach, doesn't adjust. A single bloom just remains there. Then by sunrise, the vase is absent, switched with something smaller, softer, more refined. No clarification. You hear murmurs from the parlour maids. They've been like this for years, ever since the silver tray matter. No one understands what the silver tray matter was, but it's spoken with such gravity you know better than to probe. It's a struggle of nuance. He manages the front of house display, the glimmer, the bearing, the correct way to fold a napkin with just enough starch that it keeps its fold. She manages the engine beneath, the linens that show up on schedule, the scullery that doesn't overflow, the fact that no napkin ever gets folded twice because the first one was marked. He is shine, she is stability. You once observed them cross each other in the main hallway. Neither talks, but the butler fixes his cuff. The housekeeper fixes nothing. And yet somehow it is he who appears rumpled. After the instant passes, they don't need to converse. Their competition plays out in marks and looks, and she'll modify the tea service timing without asking him. He'll reorganise the silverware drawer just barely. She'll advance the flower request by a day. He'll ask the boot boy shine the bells, her bells. But here's the turn. It never drops into disorder, because beneath their quiet clash, they grasp something essential. They are matched, and more than that, they are supports. If either one crumbles, the house leans. So they push, they probe, they reclaim, but they do not wreck. Because at the close of the day, when the master bell sounds and the kitchen explodes in activity and the fire needs starting and the table must be arranged, they operate in flawless harmony, shoulder to shoulder, without a sound. And yet, even in that flawless harmony, there's pressure wound like a clock spring. You observe it unfold. During the garden gathering, the mistress has asked for an outdoor meal. Tea tables beneath the elms, delicate sandwiches, cucumber, pieces arranged like lace. It's the butler's occasion, or it ought to be. He picks the silver tea collection, places the napkin circles, chooses the serving staff with precision. But the housekeeper, she picks the tablecloths, sharp, white and anchored at the edges with tiny sewn roses. The butler lifts an eyebrow. Too fancy, he mumbles. She doesn't answer, she simply spreads them out. And when the guests show up, they remark on the cloths. Beautiful, one of them says, so refined and not a crease in view. The butler grins. Narrow, empty, she says nothing. But you spot the slightest lift of her jaw. Later, when a wasp threatens the sandwich plate, it's the butler who waves at it with his handkerchief, knocking 2 tarts. It's the housekeeper who substitutes them quietly with another plate. Already cooled, already prepared. He tenses, glances at her. She continues on. These aren't fights for spectacle. They're fights of standing. He labours to be noticed. She labours so that nothing is noticed. And in that difference lies their uneasy peace. The footmen are devoted to the butler, naturally. He teaches them in shine, in stance, in the careful craft of responding to a call with precisely the right inflection. But the maids, they observe her, track her signals, mirror her quiet, learn to maintain their place, not with ceremony, but with consistency. The house splits naturally, unspoken but even, like 2 hands joined behind a spine, never quite meeting, but always shifting. In time, it becomes a beat, one that only fractures when the limits fade, like the night the vicar's niece comes early. No one anticipated her. The guest room hadn't been opened. The butler scowls, flustered, sends a note. The housekeeper reads it, says nothing. 10 minutes later, the room is set. Fire burning, perfumed linen, a tray of mild tea on the bedside. The butler stands in the passage, mouth tight. You should have informed me, he says. I did, she answers. 6 weeks back, she comes today. His expression changes. Understanding, then annoyance, then regard, just a flash. She pivots, walks off, keys jingling softly like wind chimes. That's how their frozen conflict operates. Neither prevails, neither surrenders. Each controls a realm, each holds, and the house. It flourishes in the gap between them because it requires both. His decoration and her groundwork, his shine and her heartbeat. One day, long after the kitchen has grown silent, you discover them both standing in the entrance. Neither talks. They're simply observing the front hall, newly polished, hushed, prepared for morning. They nod once, not to each other, to the house, and then, wordlessly, they pivot and separate. That's their manner, not companionship. Purpose. You don't trust the stories? At first. Who would? The housekeeper, the symbol of restraint, ruler of folded linen and unspoken standards, defying, impossible, unthinkable. And yet the whispers seep in, carried like vapour through the channels. She once secured the silver closet and refused to unlock it, turned back the master's visitors on a Sunday, left the ledger visible on purpose, so the mistress would discover who'd been overspending. You attempt not to trust them, but then you begin to spot things. Small indicators, a payment postponed, a vendor quietly switched, a roast dropped from the menu after the master objected, not brought back even after he requested. Small things, nothing obvious, nothing loud, but indicators of pushback. And one day, it isn't understated. It starts with a chicken. The master desires roast bird for dinner. He requests it straight, with that voice that allows no hesitation. The cook grimaces. She's lacking in hens. It's not her blame. The shipment was sparse. She mentions so, but the housekeeper says nothing, just nods, exits the room. And at dinner? What's delivered? Braised beef. No explanation. The master raises a brow. I requested chicken, he says. The butler stiffens. The cook disappears behind the door. But the housekeeper. She moves forward, notebook in hand. There were no hens acceptable, sir. I made the modification. I trust it is satisfactory. It is not a query. He blinks, says nothing, and eats the beef. No one mentions it later, but the next morning, the cook gets a bigger poultry shipment with her name on it. in her script. The housekeeper had arranged it herself. That's when you comprehend her defiance isn't volume, it's accuracy. She doesn't yell, she declines. Declines to deliver food she doesn't sanction, declines to permit waste, declines to yield when she knows the material will rip. You begin to notice it elsewhere. When the mistress demands more roses, though the garden's already been cleared bare. No objection, but the vases are filled with peonies. Fresh, fragrant, magnificent. The mistress says nothing. The next week, she asks for peonies. The housekeeper nods. No display, no victory. But you realise, because this is her defiance, not against the house, but for it. She shields it from its own stupidity, from impulses, from idleness, from recklessness disguised as instruction. Even the staff send ticked. When the new footman attempts to avoid his obligations, claiming sickness, she sends him to recover, but the next day assigns him to buff every brass stair rail. No penalty, just reality. You're well enough to deceive, she says gently. You're well enough to labour. And he does. But defiance in her grasp isn't a blade. It's an instrument, a quiet rebalancing of strength. One refusal at a moment you witness it again when a new portrait shows up. The mistress's cousin, some aristocratic wisp of a woman, has delivered it as a present, an oil painting of roses in a gaudy gold frame. She demands it be mounted in the drawing room. The housekeeper obeys, almost. She has it framed, mounted, illuminated with attention. But in the smallest drawing room, the one that's occupied only on wet afternoons, the one with the short ceilings and the green-shaded windows, the portrait appears incorrect there, dulled, misplaced. But it's there. Technically, the mistress's wish is met. And when the cousin stops by, "Oh yes," the housekeeper says smoothly. Madam desired it to be somewhere unique, a calmer spot for contemplation. The cousin glows, the mistress nods, and the painting stays exactly where she positions it. That's the brilliance of her resistance. It's covered in obedience. Every decision is measured, intentional, wrapped with believable submission, but underneath, mastery. And sometimes, only sometimes, her defiance is experienced. It occurs when a guest shows up unexpectedly, not a pleasant guest. An old companion of the master's, recognised for his booming voice, roaming hands, and habit to appreciate the younger maids with too much attention. The last time he visited, the tweenie sobbed in the still room for hours. This time, he's greeted at the entrance with formality, so icy it could freeze glass. The housekeeper provides him a guest room that hasn't been ventilated in weeks. The fire is cold. The bed linen is fresh, but simple. The tea comes late. The sugar dish is bare. The staff reply slowly, purposefully. The signal is obvious. You're not wanted here. He cuts his visit short. No one utters a word, but the kitchen staff exchange looks. And the tweenie? That night she consumes 2 pieces of cake, not 1, 2. You start to question how many other struggles she's waged this way, so quietly. No one saw the battle, how many catastrophes she's prevented, how many rages she's calmed, how many explosions she's taken in. It's not just arrangement, she's safeguarding its honour, for the house, for the staff, for herself, and even for the family, though they seldom earn it. She once informed the cook, if the household loses regard for itself, it won't matter how spotless the silver is. You didn't grasp what that meant at the time. Now you do. Because every buffed banister, every lavender-perfumed sheet, every sharp fold isn't just decoration. It's evidence that someone is observing, that someone cares, that this place will not descend into mayhem, not while she's still moving through these halls. And when she has to, defy the rules now and then to keep everything running, so be it. Because the house might have an owner, but it belongs to her. Nobody begins as a housekeeper. You discover this gradually, across countless quiet tea services and gleaming brass fixtures. It starts as gossip in the washing room, a rumour shared over stacked towels. She wasn't always this way, you understand. And one foggy morning while you're cleaning the mudroom, the cook verifies it. She began as a preserves maid, just 13 years old, climbed her way forward. You stare. The picture doesn't make sense. It's unthinkable to see her, your housekeeper, as a child, cuffs too loose, fingers chapped from lye soap, gaze uncertain and flickering in the dim light. But it's real. Everyone holds a separate memory of her. The head servant remembers her as a young maid who once mended his glove unprompted. The washing woman says she used to rest beside the drying frames during freeze nights, simply to ensure the garments wouldn't freeze solid and rip. The groundskeeper swore she rescued the fruit trees once, recommending a lime treatment for the bark before disease spread. All of it creates something understood. She rose, and she deserved every advancement, and nothing came easily. You start to recognize the evidence of her journey. How she can hoist a bucket without liquid sloshing, thumb placed exactly beneath the rim. How she examines fireplace, remains with one look and determines if it blazed too intensely. How she rethreads a drapery cord back through its wheel unassisted. It's not simply recollection, it's knowledge. She's performed every duty in this residence. She's scrubbed the identical stones you scrub, wrung the identical linens, patched the identical stockings, but she doesn't discuss it. She doesn't leverage it to instruct. Rather, she observes. She waits to discover if you will understand it, if you'll trace the identical path, not simply upward, but deeper, grasping not simply the action, but the reason. Why the towels fold in 3 parts, not 4. Why the tea container must be cleaned before unsealing. Why the lady's shoes are buffed in reverse circles. She's not instructing you a position. She's evaluating whether you're deserving of her inheritance. And that's when you grasp it completely. She's not simply managing this residence, she's preparing its tomorrow. You recall the occasion she gave the drawing room maid the supply journal, not from obligation, but to observe if she'd treat it carefully. You recall how she studies you polish the bronze call cords, gaze focused, not seeking flawlessness but for technique. She's constantly assessing. Not simply execution, capability, because someone must succeed her eventually and she will never announce who she selected. But you believe she already understands. The indications are delicate, but they're present. You start observing minor advantages moving toward you. Subtle, nearly invisible, like the heating of tea before it's served. Initially, she requests your view only once, only regarding table linens. Which of these options would you select for midday tea? You hesitate? Examine the creased white damask and the soft blue fabric. Select the blue. She acknowledges, offers nothing further, but she employs it that afternoon. Following, she permits you to manage the account book, not the primary one, a duplicate, a minor side register with entries on preserved goods and tallow. Maintain it for the week, she instructs, simply until I complete with the central record. You hold it like it might shatter in your grasp. You verify the blossom entries 3 times. Nobody else receives access, not even the head servant. And then she ceases, observing you so intensely that's when you understand something has transformed. She doesn't hover when you prepare the sitting room service. She doesn't examine your serviette arrangements before dinner. She doesn't adjust your pressing technique. Not because she ceased noticing, because she's observing something different now. She's observing to discover what you do when she's not observing. It resembles being evaluated in stillness. Others recognize it also. The kitchen helper whispers, "You're her chosen one now, but without bitterness." More like wonder, like you've entered a position most dread to occupy. The head servant. He doesn't speak much, but one afternoon you discover the storage door open and hear him mention to her, "You've been reducing your burden." And she responds, "The residence will require another intellect eventually." Eventually. It doesn't sound pressing, but it reverberates for weeks. Then one afternoon you discover a key, not simply any key, one from her collection, covered in fabric left on your supply tray. No message, no clarification. You present it to her, anticipating an examination. She glances up from her workspace. "That's for the fabric storage," she states. "You'll require it for tomorrow. That's everything." And in that instant you sense the pressure not of iron but of confidence. The variety that isn't voiced, the variety that's acquired repair by repair, level by level, crease by crease. She doesn't commend you. She doesn't grin. But she inscribes a name in her register that evening, you understand, because you observe her composing by lamp glow, the ink deliberate and precise. Your name. No crimson ink, simply black. Fixed. You don't comprehend you've become her undertaking until she begins correcting you less and challenging you more. It starts in the preserve room. You're organising the compartment of pressed handkerchiefs, each one embroidered, steamed, creased in flawless thirds. She enters behind you. You anticipate her to indicate the somewhat uneven edge or the one creased with the needlework facing the incorrect direction, but rather she inquires, "Why do you believe we crease them this manner?" You blink. You've never been requested to consider it. To make them accommodate, you respond tentatively. She halts, then softly, so the embroidery appears first, and then she departs. You remain there grasping a portion of fabric, like it's suddenly the answer to the complete residence. That's how she starts to instruct, not with directions, but with inquiries. How do you determine the towels are sufficiently dried to put away? What does it signify when the washing compound starts solidifying in the container? Why might a visitor request water twice in the identical evening? Each inquiry is an examination, but not of recollection, of focus. She's developing your perception, your capacity to recognize what others overlook, to anticipate, to arrange. She doesn't state you're prepared, she simply starts transferring you more. One afternoon, she dispatches you to receive the bread shipment alone. "Verify for quality," she states. "How will I determine?" "You'll determine," she answers. And you do, because now you detect for fragrance, you test the exterior, you hear for the gentle fracture that indicates it was prepared before sunrise. You tally the loaves, even though she didn't request you to, and when you present her the receipt she states nothing, simply archives it. Following week, she dispatches you to oversee the arrival of lantern fuel. The week afterward, she requests you to document the storage rotation, and before long the remaining workers start yielding to you. The junior brings you her inquiries. The recent housemaid observes how you secure the window ties. The head servant lifts a brow and you position behind the housekeeper at dinner, and she doesn't adjust your bearing. He's recognized. Everyone has. You don't dress in a separate outfit. You don't occupy a different place. You haven't received a designation, but your labor is transformed now. She's started transferring her domain forward, strand by strand, measure by measure, not by declaration, by demonstration. And one twilight, as the sun descends past the shrubs and the residence illuminates with comfortable lamp glow, she presents you her writing tool. Simply once, would you record the tea consumption from today? The account book is already available, the space is prepared. You accept the writing tool and your palm doesn't tremble once. Your penmanship materializes in the account book. Something changes, not simply in the ink, but in you. The space is modest, simply a few entries. Portions of Darjeeling, the quantity of biscuits removed from the container, the absent utensil later discovered in the washing basin drain. Nothing impressive, nothing lasting. But the following morning, when the tea supply arrives, punctually, and the inventory corresponds the tally. She acknowledges once, and you comprehend she's examining your capability to perceive ahead, not simply chronicle the history. The instructions arrive quicker now, no longer distributed over seasons. She's condensing them like creasing a cloth. Precise, crisp edges, no space for looseness. One afternoon, she presents you an empty meal outline for Thursday. You look upward, estimate tally 6, no youngsters. One minister. The lady favours delicate pastries, and that's everything. No formulas, no component catalogues. You compose it, you revise it, you deliver it. She evaluates it in stillness, then states, the cream dessert will be too dense. Substitute it, you substitute it. You don't inquire with what you already grasp. Citrus pastry, always citrus pastry. Then arrives the supply verification. She assigns it to you on a Wednesday. The account book must be reconciled against the storage by Friday evening. You invest hours tallying containers, detecting seasonings, measuring grain by candle glow. You release your writing tool twice. You nearly chronicle the clover cinnamon. But on Friday, when you present your calculations, she examines through the account book, verifies and shuts. The register. Corresponds one word, but it arrives like recognition, and the workers recognize the junior helper presents you her drying schedule. Before you inquire, the servant provides you the entrance to the yard door. Without direction, even the cook grumbles less. When you enter her territory, you're not simply one of the helpers now, you're hers, her undertaking, her student, her replacement in development, and yet she never states as much. She never commends you directly, that's not her method. But there are instances that communicate louder than praise. One morning, you discover she's placed a message concealed into the tea container. Strong perception on the spice loaf. Reduce the sweetener by half following time. It's not marked, but you recognize the penmanship. You understand. Another afternoon, you encounter her in the corridor. She's grasping the owner's financial documents. A worker inquires her regarding the washing postponement. She halts and states, "Inquire her." She indicates you. And exactly like that, the inquiry is yours. The accountability is yours. You respond accurately, and she continues. That's how the change starts. Not with ritual, not with authorization, but with burden. Burden added to your frame, piece by piece, like liquid in a container. One responsibility, one space, one choice at a time. She still operates the residence, but now you grasp a section of it. And as you traverse the corridors in the dawn hours, verifying the shutters, sensing the pattern, hearing for a plank that protests too loudly or a hinge that requires lubricant, you comprehend you've started moving like her. You've started considering like her. And one afternoon, earlier than you ever anticipated, this residence might be yours. Not by succession, but by confidence. She doesn't declare her exit. Of course she wouldn't. That's not her method. You initially detect it in the spaces. The morning she remains longer in her chamber. The afternoon she abandons a responsibility incomplete, not by error, but by intention. A gradual transfer covered in stillness. And then one evening, she dispatches you alone to manage the fuel. Workers tally the bundles, she states. Don't permit them to deceive you again. It's the initial time she's stated again. She's examining your recollection of something she never openly told you. You do recall. 2 shipments prior, 3 bundles were damp and insufficient. So this time you transport a lantern. You verify every bundle. You strike the surfaces. You measure one. The workers complain, but they don't deceive you. When you arrive to the residence, you discover her positioned by the sitting room flame, not at her workspace. Well, she inquires. You provide her the tally, the mass, the duration. You even mention one worker coughed into the fuel. She grins somewhat, then shuts her gaze. You're almost prepared, she whispers. Your chest constricts. Almost prepared. Prepared for what? The following morning, she's not at breakfast, nor at mid-morning inspections. Rather, there's a closed letter on your cushion, addressed in her penmanship inside. 1 key, 1 message. Compartment, storage, account books, yours! She's departed to attend her sibling in Bath. And prolonged visit. No arrival date, no ceremony. You remain in your modest attic chamber, the letter in your palms, and you sense the burden descend. Not like alarm, but like reality. The residence is yours now. Not officially, not enduringly, but practically, completely, operationally it is yours. The accountability arrives like snow. gentle, quiet, substantial, and yet somehow you're prepared. You rise earlier, you enter her position, not literally, but into the pattern she abandoned. You perform the inspections, you verify the latches, you approve the meal plans, you respond the owner's inquiry without hesitating. You don't simply preserve sequence, you establish it. And the workers, they regard you naturally. Not one of them inquires where she's departed. Not one challenges your position because she has developed them also to recognize you. That's the concluding instruction, isn't it? A genuine housekeeper doesn't grasp authority. She develops into it until nobody recalls when it wasn't hers to start with. It isn't until you're positioned in her former chair, your chair now, that you comprehend how minimal you genuinely knew her. Not the procedures, those you've retained, not the account books you've conquered, those also, but her intellect. Because now it's you, positioned up past midnight, gazing at the tallow remnant, considering whether to release the recent washing helper after the shattered container incident. She's youthful, awkward, but truthful. Would your forerunner have provided her another opportunity, you consider? Yes, but you're not her. You execute the judgment. You retain the child. The container, after everything, was already fractured. The following week you confront the fabric emergency. The vendor is delayed, the owner has visitors arriving tomorrow, and the extra serviettes misaligned. She would have located a method. So you do also. You stain the former fabrics with concentrated tea. It obscures them sufficiently to appear intentional. A fresh collection, harmonized. Nobody challenges it. The cook raises an eyebrow, impressed. Didn't consider that, she mutters. You acknowledged silent satisfaction developing behind your chest. Then arrives the letter from Bath, her penmanship as solid and precise as always, I hear. The residence is constant, the owner is satisfied, the workers are faithful, well executed, one sheet. But it elevates you more than a feast's portion of praise. She's observing from distance but releasing. And you begin forming the residence in your manner. The storage labels get recomposed, cleaner, sharper. The worker timetables adjust somewhat, fewer late rotations, more distributed responsibilities. You relocate the heating stones nearer to the kitchen for simpler reach. Minor modifications, but they spread. The servant ceases calling you Miss, he states. Ma'am, now. And the lady, she provides you a catalogue for the evening preparations without inquiring if you're accessible. Of course you are. You're constantly accessible. That's what it signifies to grasp the residence in your palms. And one twilight, after the metal has been tallied and the finances reconciled, you enter your chamber, arrange the afternoon away, and look toward the slim compartment beside your bed. Within the letter, the key. You haven't required the key in weeks, because every compartment is available to you now. You don't request for entrance. You are the entrance. And though nobody proclaimed it, no bell was sounded, no ribbon severed. You've transformed into what she once was, the silent authority of this magnificent and groaning vessel, the intellect behind the veil, the steady palm guiding every mechanism. And every so often you capture your image in a burnished tea container or a corridor mirror. You observe the bearing, the appearance, the minor tilt of the jaw, and for a flicker of an instant you're certain you observe her not positioned behind you, but within you. The residence inhales with your pattern now, every sound of the corridor timepiece, every protest of the plank beneath the third step, every breath of vapour from the washing chamber bears your mark softly, invisibly, like the aroma of lavender liquid on the fabrics. You're not constantly observed, but you are sensed. It's in how the junior helper verifies the bronze twice before buffing because she understands you'll recognise if she doesn't. It's in how the servant adjusts his necktie when you enter the corridor, though you haven't spoken a syllable, and it's in the lady's tone when she states, "We'll abandon the preparations to her," without requiring to specify who her is. You. Constantly you. But with power arrives invisibility. It's peculiar. You direct everything, and yet the visitors seldom know your identity. To them, the courses arrive punctually, the hearths radiate precisely right, and the wash bowls disappear by enchantment. They never inquire how, because the marvel is yours, and yours exclusively. Some afternoons you miss the rushing, the excitement of discovering, observing, predicting her following action. Now, you are the one not being predicted. You are the enigma, and that delivers its own burden. The choices are yours now, without evaluation. The payment envelopes are tallied by your palm, the cautioning looks, the acknowledgements of silent approval. They originate from your expression, and with all of it arrives something unexpected: isolation. You're encompassed by individuals, footfalls, voices, amusement downstairs, but constantly a measure separated. You consume alone precisely before the workers. You rest with one ear alert, the timetable rotating in your intellect. You never genuinely relax because the residence doesn't either. But you do possess one secret, a practice. Deep at night, after the flames are secured and the lamps reduced, you arrive to the identical location every week, the fabric storage. It's silent there, substantial, enclosed calm. You ignite a remnant of tallow, simply sufficient to observe, and you position for 5 minutes. No catalogues, no adjustments, no observing, simply the aroma of stiffener and lavender and age, the hush of steamed cloths, and the recollection of her, your forerunner, your instructor, who probably did the identical. You envision her in the identical storage decades prior, relaxing her frame against the timber tallow flickering at her feet. Perhaps she was isolated also. Perhaps she murmured to the creased fabric simply to hear something respond. Perhaps that's why she instructed you, so she wouldn't disappear completely when the residents forgot her identity. And perhaps now, without speaking a syllable, you're executing the identical, maintaining the stillness, arranging for whoever arrives following. You start to recognize the smallest changes before anyone else. How the lady creases her gloves, somewhat more gradually, the additional cough from the head servant after dinner, the ripped hem on the junior's apron that she's too frightened to reference it all transfers in stillness for them, but to you it communicates volumes. This is your residence now, not by possession but by perception, and you've transformed into the variety of woman who adjusts reality before it protests loud sufficient for others to hear. You have in result converted anticipation into an craft. The owner requests a visitor chamber be prepared ready. You've already ventilated it that morning. The cook worries over the roast being too modest. You've silently relocated the larger one to the upper platform of the cold chamber. Even the yard child forgets to mention a fractured sheet in the glass house. But you've abandoned a message on the glazier's receipt. It's no longer regarding responding. It's regarding predicting. And yet despite all the exactness, there's a warmth now, not a gentleness. You haven't transformed gentle, but a humanness, the variety that exists beneath stiffened collars and numbered compartments. You dispatch the washing helper to relax after a dizzy episode. You provide the servant a set of dried stockings from the housekeeper's reserve when his boots surrender in the precipitation. You even permit the assistant cook to admit her sibling for 5 minutes at Christmas. Unspoken generosities, no commendation, no chronicle, but they spread because you recall what it was like to sense invisible, tiptoeing behind a woman who constantly seemed 2 measures forward. And now, you're her. You've transformed into the narrative murmured in the corridor, the burden behind the regulations, the explanation things operate smoothly even when nobody observes you transfer. And although you seldom laugh directly and never elevate your tone, your existence is as solid as the account book binding and twice as lasting. And on certain twilights, when the world hushes itself precisely right, you accept your tea alone, positioned in the passage, gazing out over the front yard. The shrubs are shaped, the stones freshly rotated, the gas lamps flicker like observant gazes. You consume once, permit the vapour spiral into the atmosphere, and you hear not for difficulties, but for the sound of sequence. It's a silent, delicate music, And you, yes, you are the invisible director. The periods change and you barely recognize, not because they don't signify, but because you've already considered for them. The winter coverings emerged last week. The substantial drapes are suspended. Fuel has been accumulated in the east cellar precisely in case the merchants strike again like they executed last year. You don't wait for cold. You prevent it. And in that manner, you've arrived to comprehend something deeper. This position is not regarding regulations or account books or even compliance. It's regarding equilibrium. And a residence like this isn't a fixed thing. It's living, inhaling, aging, requiring. Too gentle and it deteriorates into disorder. Too severe and it spoils into bitterness. So you traverse the tightrope every single afternoon, and somehow after all these years, you've transformed into the expert of it. You sense it in how the workers shift when you enter a chamber. Productive, not nervous, you observe it in how the lady now requests for your counsel, not simply your assistance. And you understand it from how even the owner, proud and remote as he is, receives your silent recommendations without challenging. How you understand because you do understand the design of this residence, the pattern of its walls, the emotional climate of each level. You transport it in your skeleton now. You can almost sense when the shoes in the cloakroom are beyond arrangement, when the sitting room plants are one irrigation too dry, when the atmosphere in the kitchen is reduced by half a grin. And that, more than any regulation manual, is what makes you irreplaceable. Not power, not dread, but confidence. And one afternoon, as you transfer the magnificent mirror in the west corridor, the one that once made you straighten your apron nervously, you cease. You don't adjust your collar, you don't smooth your garment, you simply gaze, and for the initial time you observe her. Not the former housekeeper, not your forerunner, but the woman who grasps the implements now. Her frame is upright, her gaze composed, her palms arranged, not in assistance but in preparedness. Because something else is transforming also. You've heard murmurs the owner might be withdrawing. The family is discussing of a fresh estate, somewhere calmer, and though nobody has stated it aloud, you understand this household may be approaching its concluding chapter. You've observed it before. Former residences diminish, families change, workers disperse, but the housekeeper remains until the absolute end. It occurs not with a terrible noise, but with an envelope, substantial paper, excellent wax, the family symbol pressed deep within. Information that the residence will be rented, not purchased, not yet, but sealed, preserved only by skeleton workers, a caretaker, a groundskeeper, no complete household. You examine the letter twice, deliberately. No reference of your identity, but the significance is sharp. They'll no longer demand complete domestic functions. They appreciate you for steadfast dedication, and then they inquire ever so courteously whether you would support in concluding. You position the letter on your workspace. You smooth the border and you release breath, not with resentment, not with dread, but with a peculiar and simple grace. Because unlike everyone else, you were prepared. You've observed residences conclude before, though none like this one. And so you start. You accept supply, not simply of objects, but of recollections. The green fabric chair where the lady wept after her child departed to battle. The fractured teacup cook constantly reached for on Mondays. The bronze doorknob in the east section that nobody ever employed, but you lubricated it anyway. Every fortnight, precisely in case, you arrange away the account books, compose concluding directions. Approve on payments with ink you maintain warming by the lamp. You direct the servant to arrive to his uncle's in Surrey. You organise a fresh placement for the junior with a compassionate housekeeper in Hampstead. You conduct the concluding dinner in the workers' corridor. Simple roast and pastry, but with amusement. You even permit the washing helper to distribute a portion of sherry, though you never permitted it before. Then, one morning, without declaration, you execute what your forerunner once executed. You abandon, not out the entrance, but the worker's door, silent early. You transport one carpet container, your umbrella, and the implements. Not all of them, simply one. The principal key, the one you never employed, the one you were never instructed to maintain, that somehow you constantly possessed it. And as you traverse down the frost-covered road, your shoes solid in the stones, you don't gaze backward. Because what you've constructed doesn't exist in walls. It exists in recollection, in technique, in inheritance. You were the silent engine behind it everything. You grasped the residence in your intellect, your breath, your stillness. And now you transport it with you wherever you proceed following, whether you assist again or not at all, whether you diminish into a cottage near the shore or start anew in another magnificent residence. One reality remains. You are the woman behind everything. And the residence, though silent, will recall you, even if nobody else does. The residence is silent now. The flame is reduced and the drapes have been pulled. The aroma of polish remains faintly on the staircase railing, and somewhere distant off, the sounding of the corridor timepiece maintains flawless time. You're no longer traversing those corridors, but part of you still is gently transferring between chambers, adjusting the burden of stillness and the angle of illumination. The responsibilities are executed, the metal is accumulated, the shoes are arranged precisely right, and now it's time to relax. Tonight, as you drift off, you might envision the gentleness of aged fabric cloths and the hush of footfalls that never precisely resound. You might sense a key in your pocket, smooth and familiar, or the chill of a bronze handle. Precisely before sunrise, permit those pictures diminish gently. Permit them to transport you not to a magnificent manor or a dusty account book, but to a comfortable, silent location where everything is precisely as it should be. No responsibilities awaiting, no bells sounding, simply tranquility. You've executed sufficient. Shut your gaze, inhale deeply. The housekeeper's off responsibility now.